Here we are at Money 2020 in Bangkok, and I'm standing at the TwentyFold booth. We're just about to interview a unicorn, so get ready. His name is Gavin Adam, and he is a CTO of Hodfords. Rather entrepreneurial bunch of guys based in Hong Kong, UK, Vietnam, where else? That's it. So tell me, why have you come all the way from Brighton to Bangkok? Is that like sister twin cities, Brighton
Yes.
to Bangkok?
Well, I mean, other than the obvious reasons, we're here to support one of our clients, and we've been building some technology for them in the form of TwentyFold.
And what is TwentyFold? Is a really nice name. What does it actually do?
Well, we were asked to solve a problem, and the specific problem was how do we get the broadest and deepest collection of fintech-specific data in the world? Not just that's going to be, more data. So, in a world of haystacks and needles, let's get more hay. So how do we find those needles? And it's about trying to process that data into something that you can actually find and use when you're making things like investment decisions. Or let's say you're a fintech and you want to go into new markets, or you're an investor wanting to invest in a new fintech.
So give me an example. I mean, obviously a lot of these fintech companies want to break out of their home markets, right? But they then, are they using your platform to find partners, to hire people, to raise money? If you're a fintech kind of not the VC side, but the entrepreneur side.
So from the entrepreneur side, it's really about, you think in the world of fintech, there's something like 22,000 investment organizations going in looking for said unicorn, right? They have to kiss a lot of frogs, but at the same time, those fintechs and those startups, they've got to go and find those right investors. Just because someone's got bags of money that they're running around with trying to spend, doesn't mean they're going to spend them with them. So it's a case of, well, perhaps it's better for me to go and speak to 5 organizations who I know have invested in my market, or in my specific use case, or in the technology that I'm all about and all over, rather than going and trying to educate some new investor as to why they should be putting their money in with me.
It's really interesting because I know that, it's always troubling for a startup, the amount of time you have to spend knocking on doors to find the right investor. And it's very hard to get the profile. You can go mad on Google, you can use a bit like Perplexity AI or whatever to search things. But I guess your proposition to those entrepreneurs is use our platform and you'll save time, or you'll find the right people. How deep can you go in terms of understanding these investors?
I think for the entrepreneur's mindset and use case, it's very much about how do you spend your time effectively.
Yeah.
Now, the question to ask is how long do you normally spend going out prospecting for investors?
Yeah.
And there was one chap I was speaking to yesterday, and he said, well, look, I normally spend 3 months putting together my hit list of who I have to go after. After the demo that he just witnessed, it was a case of, well, you've just done in 5 minutes what I do in five months.
Seriously?
It was about, that's the 12
Yeah.
people, not just companies, those are the 12 individuals I need to go off and speak to.
And will he then know a little bit more about those individuals? How deep will the profile go of those individuals? Is it what they've invested in before, or their kind of their interests?
So you'll
their
see
own
that
background?
you'll see the intersection point of what they're investing in and who they are.
Yeah.
So it'll be a case of, right, we know that particular company have already invested in 12 other fintech startups who are into peer-to-peer lending in sub-Saharan Africa, let's say. And that way you've got a clear understanding, well, actually that might be what they're after in terms of us.
So basically, TwentyFold is like the dating agency of Money 2020 in terms of, because all these event organizers have always tried to have apps, etc., and they have networking areas, and to kind of accelerate that kissing the frog experience that you mentioned.
Yes, I think really the whole vision was, you've got these great events where you've got people come to talk, to build relationships and do business. How do they have those conversations outside of the context of those events? And how do you keep those connections alive, and how do you find new connections? And the idea was, well, we've got all of this information about these organizations, we need to start harnessing that and pulling it together and then providing that as a service.
So the problem is that you and I were talking about this earlier, is that there's a lot of AI being kind of thrown around across various startup pizzas across a layer of cheese, right? I'm really curious to understand exactly how you came in and have taken what's happening with algorithms, with learning, with deep learning, with machine learning, to apply it to this?
I think that's a great question. And when we were first brought in, it was a case of, right, we have a particular problem we need to solve for. We've got 65,000 companies we want to profile. We want to collate that data into a single place and provide a consistent editorial voice and lens on that fintech universe. Great, that's fine, but they wanted to create specific data points. Things like competitive advantage, what's the mission statement for the company, what's the problem they're trying to solve. And what you'll find is just such a variety of different pitch decks that get chucked around. And if you've got really, really slick marketing, which actually some of the best unicorns out there really don't have. They might have five slides, but a hell of a great idea. And when their founders are talking to investors, they get the message across. Not everyone can do that.
Yeah.
And if you've got people all around the world who are looking to try and find these unicorns, they want to be able to find a sort of consistent way of being able to apply sort of a filter over everything.
So what you're saying is you're using machine learning to create consistency?
Yeah.
To kind of apples to apples as opposed to...
Is
it like a time shortener in terms of the material you have to look at, or is it...
So
where is the smart?
Let me put it a slightly different way, which is that, you know, in a previous life where I was again in the I suppose data intelligence space.
Yeah.
Often you'd find, and this particularly in the world of retail, they'd buy retail data that was fairly made up and sparse because that was the only data, and it was a case of, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man's king. The question is that actually the king's eye in the first place, you know? In this case, it's well, look, we've got all these various different data points. Is that comparable to that? How do we unify it, smooth it, and then compare it? So what we did initially is we tried to fix that problem with humans. So we built up a data team. We had a load of very, very talented data analysts going out and collating these sparse data points, comparing them.
Outside of the information that
Yes.
Money 2020 had. So
Exactly.
you were going out and looking for complementary...
We were, I suppose, effectively replicating what's done in the investment cycle for a large number of these banks and VCs and private equity houses, where you'd have people doing desktop research.
Yeah.
Start with Google, tell me about this company, find out their financials, read various news articles. Now tell me what's the problem they're trying to solve, what's their mission, what's their competitive advantage, and essentially create me a pitch deck. Now, the challenge there, when you've got 40 people doing that, you've got 40 different opinions. It's very subjective.
Oh, I see what you mean, yeah.
And how do you then compare that person's viewpoint to that person's?
Yes.
You also have inconsistency in language. You know, if someone's got very eloquent, that will come across really well. Someone who's just very factual, less well. So how can you harmonize all of that? Because this is much more of a narrative you're talking about than just raw data. So we failed on that, and we failed fairly quickly. And it was a really interesting exercise which we ran for a couple of months. But
You mean the human side failed?
yes, yeah. So we had this team running for a couple of months, and we got to about 5,000 companies, and it was a very, very slow, expensive process. And that just wasn't going to scale. And not only wouldn't it scale, it wouldn't be maintainable. Particularly if that fintech universe then extends and expands
Of course,
further.
global as it is now, right?
Exactly, because we started off just looking at the States, and that was a fairly rich data set, quite easy to do.
When you go global, it's just you're lacking so much data. Right?
Data sparsity, and then you lose that comparability.
Yeah.
So you're like, well, there's all this really clever AI stuff, and everyone's talking about AI. Why don't we use that? And so we built out our own large language models. We used various techniques. We built our...
So you didn't go and dabble in the pre-existing? I mean, they've
tried
got
everything.
the funding and the backing, and they've got the engineers and all the data to
and that's
train,
the thing.
right?
But what we're trying to do is avoid any hallucination, right? You need to be able to make sure that when you come back with an answer, it's truthful. And anyone who's played around with things like ChatGPT, be careful, you do end up with, you know, there's a lot of noise out there.
Yeah.
How do you avoid those hallucinations? If you're saying something's accurate, how can you verify that it's accurate? So we've tried a number of different techniques, and initially for the first ingestion and data cycle, and as part of this data pipeline, what we do is use a number of different interactions and integration techniques. So we use RAG, we use embeddings, and we did a lot of test and learn. And we've got to the point where it's now exceptionally accurate.
So you've, in a way, to simplify it in my kind of mind, is you're not relying on the existing LLMs that are out there. You've learned from some of their processes and applied it. So you're not kind of sending off data to OpenAI or Llama and saying, right, churn this for us and we'll come back.
We are to an extent.
Okay.
And
so there's an ecosystem that you're tapping into. It's not like you've gone off independently and said, trash that.
No, because the best way to grow is stand on the shoulders of giants, right?
Yeah.
These guys have invested a huge amount, and the idea is we want to be able to use and harness that capability and that understanding of language in a way of being able to smooth and create this narrative. So the way we do it is we provide a very, I suppose it's a bit like in layman's terms, it's like prompt engineering.
Okay.
So we provide a payload of data that's encrypted end to end, and it doesn't actually get consumed by the likes of a ChatGPT.
Okay.
And we then come back with the answers, which we then store in our own data universe.
Okay, got it. And then when you're at an event like this, what are the triggers that when you're there and you're doing demos, where do people's eyes light up?
It's more a case of when they see, well, it really depends on where their use is or what their use case is. So for instance, if you're a fintech startup and you're trying to do competitive analysis, you're trying to compare yourself to other people in the market, or you're looking to a new market, it's a case of, hold on a second, I've got all the things that I need now to be able to do a proper acid test of what we've got. That's certainly one really useful element. It's also quite useful for them to see how they are perceived by the rest of the world.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I had thought of it more as a matching engine. But what you're saying, it's almost like optimizing a pitch as well, because the investors going out saying, who else is out there in my space? Yeah. They come up on your radar, how am I different to them? So in a way, it's a research tool for them as well, right? They're not just saying, find me potential investors. They're saying, help me get my story better or more suitable.
Certainly that's one aspect. And I suppose the reason why we often start in that place is because it's human instinct. Who do you Google on? Who do you Google for? You're going to Google yourself. You want to see what people know about you. Yeah. So they like to start with, oh, what do you know about me? Okay. And sometimes it might be wrong, because guess what? What's on the public web is wrong. In which case they can update that. They can claim their profile, and there's an editorial process which allows a human in the loop to be able to correct any of those sort of mistakes.
So what about you've spoken about the entrepreneur angle. What about the investor angle? I mean, investors have, VCs, funds, they always have lots of analysts and research people, and out here in Asia, they'll have pockets, right? Some will be part-time, some will be full-time, but they'll either be attending events and kind of sniffing around to see who's out there, or they're, doing desktop, but for them, it's a real challenge, right? Like finding the right. Every time I talk to VC in Asia, they're either don't like going out and mixing, so they just don't get the deal flow, right? So, what is it when they stand in front of your demo? What is it that excites them?
For them, it's having their own pet army of analysts. Instead of having a couple of assistants or people doing that finding of deals, all of that filtering and pre-analysis and pre-work is done for them. So
it's like having the kind of concept of agents, right? They're not really. I guess you haven't taken it into the agent role. Or could you? If I was a VC interested in pharmaceutical stuff, can I train my agent so any time there's a deal is it that
I think
kind of level?
That's probably the evolution of where we're going to.
Okay.
and certainly some of the additional capabilities we're putting on, things like knowledge graphs and other technologies, that's certainly the direction it probably would head in. There's a danger, I believe, from a business perspective. As soon as you start doing that sort of matchmaking, you start becoming an advisor, and you need to then have regulation and stuff like that. So
it's more of a media company than it is a
it's a discovery. It's a discovery tool.
And how is the money made? How does TwentyFold make money?
It's a subscription service.
Okay.
So, and I suppose the real key is what's the ROI for the user? And if it can save them hours and hours of their time, and they can focus on doing real work, and they can filter out all that noise and go after the deals that they're after, it shortens that deal life cycle, so they can get to those unicorns much, much faster. They're all competing for the same thing. They all want the next PayPal. They all want the next Amazon to invest in.
Talking about that, is there like one? I know it's a very young offering, right? January this year, right? Has there been a unicorn discovered through your?
I don't know whether I'd be allowed to say, but I suspect as much. Yes.
You suspect? Very nice. So I have a quite captive audience through your Web Wednesday. Have you got anything you can offer us?
Yes, I'd say sign on to TwentyFold.com.
TwentyFold, okay. 20fold.
Request a demo and talk to the guys there. And I'm sure
say I know Gav. Is it like Gav 2024 discount?
Say that I sent them, and I'm sure the business development team will be very, very interested in having a conversation and potentially providing a trial.
Very nice. Thank you, Gavin. That's great.